After a 56-win regular season that got them the 3 seed, the Timberwolves absolutely handled business with a round 1 sweep in a series that they weren't actually favored to win. You can point to any number of factors, from their elite team defense to outstanding supporting play on offense, but rightfully so, every single headline you will see starts with Anthony Edwards, who is now starting to build a pretty nice track record of being a true playoff superstar. Physical tools almost always translate to postseason basketball, and Edwards has some of the most impressive we've ever seen. It all starts with his explosiveness. You could argue he's got the quickest first step in the league, and that alone allows him to consistently beat defenders off the dribble. It isn't just burst though. Of course, the advantage starts as soon as he gets one stride by his defender's hip, but what about when he's met with contact or physicality? I guess it helps that he's also one of the league's strongest perimeter players. For a lot of prospects, it takes a couple years to build an NBA-ready body from a power standpoint. Ant had that from day one, so for him the development has been figuring out how to maximize it and embracing contact while attacking downhill. Another step in his development has been the ability to process the defense and counter. What I mean by that is when his drive left gets cut off, he reacts quickly by spinning back to his right hand, which leaves him with some room to show off his explosive verticality, with Towns there to clean up on the follow. That reminds me of something that I think gets underrated with a lot of slashers. Going right at shot blockers with aggression not only sets Ant up with an opportunity to finish, it also pulls that big man away from his matchup, which creates easy offensive rebounds. The natural reaction from a defender who's struggling to stay in front of their man is to sag off, and this is where Ant takes it to a different level with his pull-up shooting. Right about now is when it becomes really tough to gauge where he's actually at as an offensive player, because over the last 3 regular seasons, he's hit just 33% of his pull-up threes, about average, and again in 2024, he was right above that same 33% mark. And he shoots a lot of them, so we're talking about a massive sample, upwards of 1,000 attempts. In the playoffs, that sample is significantly smaller, as he's only played a total of 15 career games. But in those 15, he shot 32 of 84, or 38.1% on these looks. That's the mark of a top-tier pull-up shooter, and it's hard to differentiate between what's real and what isn't. Could it be hot shooting over a small number of games? Absolutely. I think there's a little more to it though. For one, his volume on a per-game basis has increased in each one of those years. It's entirely possible that there's a mental aspect to it. Maybe he's more confident or more in rhythm when taking these shots. Maybe they're coming more within the flow of the offense and are therefore cleaner. Which actually brings me to an even more important point, the way he's defended. Threat number 1 in his attack is obviously the driving, and playoff defenses are always going to make more of an effort to take that away than anything else. Oftentimes that means conceding better shots from outside, or as I said, cleaner looks. It'll be interesting to see how these numbers track as he builds a bigger playoff portfolio, but 2 things are for sure. He's more than comfortable going to that pull-up 3 anytime it's available, and he can create space seemingly whenever he wants. He's mastered the art of leveraging that driving. Here he starts on a drive right before quickly pulling back to his left, and even though Royce does a good job of contesting, it doesn't really matter. Here's a better example of what I'm referring to. As he walks down in isolation, you can see Durant backpedaling in preparation for a drive, and all it takes is a simple between the legs dribble for Ant to create nearly 10 feet of space. It's the same thing when he's operating from a standstill. One jab creates a ton of room, and from there he's got a very clean look at the rim. What makes this so tough to defend is that if he does decide to drive out of that jab, it's right back to the explosive first step, and when a second defender steps up to take away his lane, he doesn't immediately give the ball up. Instead, he takes one extra stride towards the rim before kicking it out to Conley for a high-quality 3. In other words, it's nearly impossible to stop this guy from touching the paint, which means he's consistently collapsing the defense, and from there, it's all about making the right play. On that last one, he telegraphed an obvious kickout, but there's a lot to like here. It starts with that explosive first step getting him into the paint, and when a second defender steps up, he uses a couple lengthy strides and some hang time to create a pass to the corner, leaving Naz Reid with a wide open triple. This one's real similar. The blow-by, the strides across the paint, except now this defender is dropping to take away the corner, to which Ant reacts by instead kicking it to an open shooter on the wing. It isn't just as simple as drive and finish or drive and kick though. Pretty much all of the league's best inside the arc scorers have some sort of in-between game, and this right here might just be the most important step in his ascension to becoming an MVP caliber player. If we look at his mid-range volume in terms of attempts per 75 possessions, you can see that this was the first year of his career where he truly leaned into these shots as a legitimate part of his arsenal. And his percentages have followed pretty much the exact same trend, peaking this year. You'll notice though that 39% isn't exactly good. Actually, it's in the 31st percentile among all players. Now we run into another dilemma because if we include the playoffs, you're still seeing the same steady increase, except instead of 30 to 39%, we're talking about 40 to 55%, starting to get into that upper echelon of elite mid-range scoring. Again, sample size is a real issue when taking these numbers at face value, but a lot of what I said with the pull-up three-point shooting can also apply here. The defense is over-indexing on his paint scoring. As soon as he takes that first step, you've got 3 defenders converging towards the rim, and he uses that in-between space to step back for a jumper. Earlier I talked about his strength and how that helps him get to the rim. He can also go into the chest of defenders to create separation for these shots. Most importantly though, I think, is the footwork. This guy's balance and coordination when working without a dribble are seriously advanced. So when he's running into a packed paint, he knows how to find the slightest openings. Take this play for example. There's no lane to attack, so he stops short and goes to a half spin, fakes a turnaround jumper before stepping across the lane for a little push shot. Or how about this one? He starts from a standstill, takes off on a drive where not 2, not 3, but 4 defenders meet him at the elbow, only for him to once again up fake and step through, which leaves Alexander Walker with a warm-up jumper from the corner that just rims out. I don't know about you, but it feels like letting Ant touch the paint isn't exactly the best recipe for getting stops. The explosive finishing, the kick-out passing, his use of the in-between game, once he got into that Suns defense, he was absolutely dicing them up. So one thing they tried was what we often see against a guy like Giannis, sending that wing defender early to overload at the nail, which may not leave him with a driving lane, but it will still leave him with an easy pass to one of Minnesota's many high-level shooters. With that said, I still think his limitations as a passer popped up quite a few times in these spots. A more advanced playmaker would definitely make this skip to the opposite corner, and that just isn't a read he's consistently making. Instead, he tries to force the issue with his live dribble and ends up turning it over. And you could see the same sort of things whenever the Suns trapped him. Once again, I think a better passer would have either hit Alexander Walker up top or McDaniels in the opposite corner, although he does still find Reed one pass away for a decent look regardless. The thing is, his scoring applies so much pressure that advanced passing isn't always necessary. When trapped up top like this, sometimes all he has to do is make the most basic read and someone on his team is left with a ton of space. I think my favorite part about Ant's growth as a player though is his patience. When trapped on the wing here, it seems obvious to give the ball up to Alexander Walker. He sees an opportunity to attack the big in space though, and then he goes reverse on the finish to score through traffic. Here's another example. Pretty much the entire defense is focused on him and what he's doing with the ball, but again, instead of quickly getting rid of it, he hunts and hunts for the best option, eventually making that cross-court skip to the corner for a great look from outside. This added patience and ability to read the defense has really elevated him as an operator in the pick and roll. The Suns made an effort to mix up coverages and keep him guessing, to which he patiently got to his spots. When it was a deep drop, he could get into the defense and utilize that in-between game. This time it's a bump and spin into a mid-range jumper with a little help from the rim, and once again, to prevent Ant from getting downhill, they'd often have that nail defender load up early, to which he makes the right pass to Conley, who's now left with an advantage to attack. A few times Phoenix also threw out a high drop coverage, meaning Nurk is going to start basically at the level of the screen before dropping, to which Ant's ability to hit the pull-up three comes in handy. And like clockwork, he's displaying great patience. He slowly dribbles towards the arc as he waits to see if Nurk is going to commit to the ball or drop, and eventually finds some room to step into a long-range jumper. The difficulty with bringing a big up to the level is how vulnerable that can leave your defense to Ant's explosiveness. Because Nurk is up on the left side, when Ant instead rejects it on a drive right, there's absolutely nobody in position to protect the rim. And even if he does use the screen, that big is going to have his hands full trying to contain him off the dribble. A third defender steps up and he uses those lengthy strides to find a layup. Here's another example. Eubanks comes out on a hedge, Ant threatens to split the coverage before taking a wide angle around the big, and that's where he finds an opening to step into a three. Then he lets KD know that we are entering a new era. When he was met with these aggressive coverages, there were a couple times where his decisions felt a bit rushed. This time he draws two to the ball, and instead of waiting for Gobert's roll to materialize, he immediately sends it to the corner, although Alexander Walker is still able to catch and shoot over the hand of Booker. For the most part though, I was thoroughly impressed with some of the reads he was making. When coming off this screen, all he's worried about is the low man, and as soon as that defender drops, he's sending a bullet to the opposite corner where Conley's left with an open jumper. It's pretty clear to me that he's a lot more comfortable making these reads going right. That way he can use his dominant hand to make the skip pass without going across his body, and the Wolves got a lot of open threes as a result of his creation. You can see the difference when he comes off a screen to his left. When the low man, in this case Gordon, drops to tag the roll, he's not going to make that same skip pass right away. Rather, he's going to keep his dribble live and hunt for a driving lane. Then after touching the paint, he hits that corner and it's still the same warm-up three. Here it is again, attacking on a left-hand drive, not making the skip right away, but continuing to display that patience as he gets to the paint, then makes the pass, and the amount of open corner threes these guys are getting is starting to get absurd. I will say though, it feels like Ant's handle isn't quite as advanced as you'd want in a pure point guard probing across the lane sort of playmaking style, so he did lose the ball or get his pocket picked a bit more than you'd like, and as I briefly mentioned earlier, he can sometimes telegraph these passes. I think a skip is the right idea here, he just doesn't force that weak side defender to make a decision. For these two reasons, he is one of the more turnover-prone shot creators in the league, which was only amplified in the Phoenix series as he was asked to control the offense more than ever and did end up averaging 4 turnovers a game. That sort of thing will obviously improve with time and has for every single year of his career, but I'm also not worried about it as much as I would be with some other offensive stars. And the reason for that is I think he has a lot to offer away from the ball, enabling a true point guard like Mike Conley or Monte Morris to take some of that decision-making burden away from him. Obviously, there's the outside shooting, which has been absolutely scorching all season long, but even scarier is what he can do after the catch. You can't leave him open, but as soon as he sees a closeout, he's exploding on a drive, and I think we already know how that goes. Even when it doesn't seem like a big advantage. Beal doesn't even leave him here, he's still a threat to catch and go, this time collapsing the defense for one of those kickouts to a corner shooter. Just like when he's on the ball, he'll blend the slashing with the shooting, threatening an attack off the catch before pulling back into a wide open three, and all of this results in some very aggressive off-ball coverage. The Suns practically face guarded him wherever he went. Look at Beal here, and because he's guarding him like that, when Conley turns the corner off a screen, there's no sort of help at the nail, turning the pick and roll into a 2 versus 2. When being face guarded like this, he's also got the athleticism to explode backdoor, and like I said, he's not at all afraid to go up with aggression. Through the first 15 quarters of this series, we saw the entire arsenal on display. The Wolves were thoroughly dominating every single time Ant touched the floor, but it was in the fourth quarter of that closeout game 4 where it became a pretty unanimous agreement that this guy's the real deal. Everything I've talked about up to this point all culminated in a masterful stretch to send his team to the second round. It started with him isolating from an open side. He gets into the defense, draws 2 down low, and finds an angle to kick it out to Conley in the opposite corner for a 3. Then on the next one, they're going to start with a high pick and roll. Ant pauses and sees that it's a drop coverage, so he uses that space to get to a pull-up midi. A couple minutes later, he gets blitzed all the way out at half court and gives the ball up to the wing. Then the possession resets with him getting the ball back up top, only with space to step into a 30-footer. Next time down, it's right back to that open side isolation, this time with his back to the basket. He does his best impression of MJ and turns into a jumper that touches nothing but the net. A play later again starts on the open side, but not for an ISO, rather a ball screen for him to attack baseline. The defense loads up early, so he steps back for a big time triple. It got to a point where the Suns very clearly had to get the ball out of his hands, so when he sets up for another isolation, he gets doubled. He makes a basic pass to Conley, and I want you to think of it like dominoes. The entire defense is in rotation because of the initial double, and the result is a corner three for McDaniels. About a minute later, he again isolates, but now the Suns leave him in single coverage, which proves to be a fatal mistake when he uses his burst to get downhill before taking flight for a huge finish. That essentially put them in front for good. He would end up getting a free bucket in transition to push his point total to 16 in the quarter, and Devin Booker, who was 1 point away from 50, tried to get some garbage time points of his own, only for Ant to send his layup off the glass. Which actually reminds me, he wasn't just doing it on offense. He was a man of many roles in this series. Of course, he can match up with any of Phoenix's ball handlers and apply on-ball pressure, and his physical tools are once again a nightmare to deal with. Lateral quickness, strength, length, he's not easy to beat off the dribble. The Wolves also played most of Phoenix's off-ball action in ball denial, and he excels in these spots because he's agile enough to not get beat on backdoor cuts. He's also one of very few guards who can offer a serious vertical presence at the rim, meaning that when needed, he could be the last line of defense, which includes some truly high-level plays like this one where he slides down to protect the rim from a drive and obliterates Booker's dunk attempt. That athleticism also helped him a ton on the glass. He usually isn't a big rebounder, but in this series they needed him to crash and close possessions, which he did time and time again. All that's to say, I'm not sure how many better playoff series performances we've ever seen from a 22-year-old. His averages of 31, 8, and 6 on 65% true shooting are already as impressive as it gets. You couple that with the 2 steals, 1 block, and all of the defensive plays he made that don't even show up on the box score, this guy's a serious problem, and I can't wait to see what he does against the defending champion Nuggets. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out my website and social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what you think of Edwards. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.